the cold winter of 1930, the small village of Wiltshire lay quiet beneath a soft layer of snow. Smoke drifted gently from chimneys, and nothing hinted that the village was about to witness one of the strangest events in its history. Harold Brown, aged 35, had been dead for 3 days. The doctors had signed the certificate. His family had mourned. His funeral had ended in silence, the kind of silence that closes a life forever. But on the evening of the third day, just as the sun dipped behind the frozen hills, the cemetery caretaker heard something. A faint sound, soft, rhythmic, completely out of place. A knock, then another, as if someone inside a coffin was trying to get out. The caretaker froze. He listened again. No wind, no animals, just that steady, muffled tapping beneath the earth. Panic rose in his chest. He ran toward Harold Brown's grave, pushed aside the snow, dug frantically at the loose soil. And then he heard it, a trembling voice. Weak, suffocating. Help! Within an hour, several men from the village gathered and unearthed the coffin. When they pried open the lid, Harold Brown lay inside, drenched in sweat and dirt, gasping for air. Alive. The villagers stood in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Only one question echoed through every mind. What had Harold seen? During those 3 days beneath the ground, Harold Brown was carried to his family's home, wrapped in blankets, shivering uncontrollably, yet breathing, alive. Doctors from the nearby town were called immediately. They questioned him, examined him, tried to understand how a man could survive 3 days in a sealed coffin, but Harold barely spoke. His eyes stayed wide, unfocused, as if he were still trapped somewhere else. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some said Harold had been misdiagnosed. Others said it was a miracle or a curse. But the caretaker insisted on what he heard. Those knocks. Those desperate cries from beneath the soil. One doctor, pale and shaken, said quietly to Harold's brother, "No human should survive that long underground. No air, no water, no light." Yet he did. That night, the Brown family gathered around Harold. A fire burned in the hearth. Warm soup sat untouched on the table. Harold stared into the flames, unmoving. Finally, his sister asked softly, "What happened to you down there?" Harold blinked slowly. His lips trembled. "I wasn't alone," he whispered. Silence filled the room. "What do you mean?" she asked. Harold looked at the floor, at his hands, at the shadows on the wall. "There was something in the coffin with me," he said. "Something that didn't breathe." The doctors assumed Harold was hallucinating. A mind traumatized by isolation and suffocation. But Harold insisted he had been fully conscious beneath the earth. At first, he said, "I thought I was dreaming. I tried to move, but my arms were pinned to my sides. The darkness pressed against my eyes. He paused, breathing shallowly. But then, I heard it. He tapped lightly on the table. Once, twice, to mimic the sound. Knocking. Not from above, from beside me. The room went cold. His mother whispered, "Harold, no, one was beside you." Harold shook his head slowly. It felt like fingers touching the wood near my face, sliding across it, searching. He closed his eyes as if the memory hurt. And then a voice, very faint, very slow, whispering my name. The villagers didn't want to hear more. They asked him to rest, to forget, to heal. But Harold could not sleep. Each time he closed his eyes, he felt something cold near his cheek, as if the darkness from the coffin had followed him home. That evening, the snow fell against the windows. Harold whispered to the caretaker, "When you dug me up, did you hear anything else? Anything moving?" The caretaker went pale. He hesitated, then nodded. "I heard you calling, but I also heard something answering." By the next morning, terror had swept through the village. People locked their doors, avoided the cemetery, whispered Harold's name as if it carried misfortune. The priest visited Harold personally. "You were given a second chance at life," he told him gently. "But you must not dwell on dark things. The dead do not speak, and nothing returns from the grave." Harold stared at him with hollow eyes. "Then what was with me?" The priest placed a hand on his shoulder. There was nothing. But Harold could still feel it, still hear the slow scratching beside his face, still sense the cold breath against his ear. Later that day, Harold's brother convinced him to return to the cemetery. "To prove to yourself it was only a nightmare," he said, reluctantly. Harold agreed. When they reached the grave, the caretaker was waiting. He looked shaken, as if he hadn't slept. "The soil," he said quietly. "It moved again last night." Harold stepped closer to the mound of snow-covered dirt. His heart pounded. He knelt, placed his hand on the frozen earth. For a moment, nothing. Then, a vibration. Small, slow, like a breath rising from beneath the ground. Harold jerked his hand away. His brother backed up. "What was that?" Harold didn't answer, because he recognized the rhythm. It was the same breath he heard in the coffin, the one that wasn't his. That night, the Brown family kept every lamp lit. No one wished to sleep. Harold sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a thick blanket, staring at nothing. His mother watched him nervously. "You're safe here," she whispered. Harold didn't respond. Outside, the wind howled softly. Snow tapped against the windows. Gentle, steady, harmless. until it wasn't. Harold suddenly looked up. "What is it?" his sister asked. He pointed toward the window. At first, the family saw nothing, just swirling snow. Then a shape appeared, a faint silhouette standing beyond the frost-covered glass. Tall, still, almost human, but not quite, Harold's breath caught. It followed me. His brother rushed to the window, but the shape vanished instantly, as if it had melted into the night. "There's nothing there," he said, trying to sound brave, failing. But Harold knew what he saw, and later, when the others finally slept, he remained awake, watching the window, listening to the faint tapping that had started again. Not random taps, rhythmic, familiar. The sound of fingers searching for him through the glass. Harold whispered to the darkness, "I know you're there." And the tapping stopped, just for a moment. Then came a slow reply. Tap, tap, tap. Exactly the same pattern from inside the coffin. Harold barely slept, and when he finally drifted off near dawn, it was not peace that found him, but a voice. Soft, slow, dragging each syllable through the cold air. Harold, his eyes snapped open. The room was dark except for the fading glow of the fireplace. Shadows stretched long across the floor, unmoving. Harold held his breath. "Harold, I'm still here." The voice wasn't coming from the window. Not from the hallway. Not from any direction at all. It came from beneath him, from under the floorboards. He pushed the blanket aside and slowly knelt. His hand hovered over the wooden planks, trembling. "You left me in the dark." Harold recoiled as if struck. "No," he whispered. "You aren't real. You aren't." A soft knock answered him. One knock, then another, exactly like the coffin. Harold backed away until he hit the wall. The knocking grew louder, clearer, as if something was rising closer and closer to the surface. He covered his ears. "Stop, please stop." But the voice only grew gentler, almost pleading. "Let me out." "Harold, let me out again." Suddenly the knocks stopped. Not slowly, not fading, as if the presence had withdrawn or moved. Harold waited, trembling, afraid to breathe. Then, from the hallway behind him, a single, soft whisper. "I found you." Harold froze. He wasn't alone anymore. At sunrise, Harold's brother found him sitting in the kitchen, pale, shaking, staring at the doorway as if expecting something to enter. "You look terrible," his brother said softly. "What happened?" Harold didn't answer. He only whispered, "It knows where I live." Before his brother could ask more, the caretaker burst into the house, breathless, terrified. "You need to come outside, now." The three of them stepped into the morning snow. The cold air was sharp, still, silent. And then they saw it. A line of footprints leading from the edge of the forest, straight toward the brown house. Bare footprints. Human. Deeply pressed into the snow, as if made by someone with great weight. No warmth at all. Harold's brother frowned. Someone's playing a cruel joke. But Harold shook his head. No one walks barefoot in this cold. No one could survive it. The footprints led directly to the back door, then stopped, not turned away, not faded, stopped, as if the person or thing had simply vanished. The caretaker swallowed hard. The prints weren't here last night. I checked on the property myself. Harold stared at the final footprint, inches from the door. It was larger than his own, much larger, and carved so deep into the snow. It seemed like whoever left it wasn't entirely human. By noon, fear had spread through Wiltshire again. Some blamed Harold. Some blamed the caretaker. Others whispered that the dead had been disturbed and wanted something back. Harold felt the pressure growing inside him, a weight he couldn't shake. "I need to see it," he said suddenly. "See what?" his brother asked. "My grave." They tried to stop him. They failed. Harold walked straight to the cemetery, boots crunching through the snow. The caretaker followed behind, muttering prayers under his breath. When they reached the burial site, Harold froze. The grave was open. Completely open. Soil shoveled aside, neatly, intentionally. The coffin lay exposed. Harold approached slowly, cautiously, peering down into the hole where he should have been resting. The coffin was empty. His brother whispered, "Someone dug it up." The caretaker shook his head violently. "No, I was here at dawn. It wasn't like this. No one came through the gates." Harold stepped closer. The wood of the coffin was scratched. Not from the outside, from within. Marks of fingernails. Deep, chaotic, desperate. Harold felt sick. "I didn't make those," he whispered. His brother stared at him. "Then who did?" Before Harold could answer, a gust of cold air surged through the cemetery. The ground trembled, just once. A small, subtle shift, as if something beneath the earth had just changed position. That night, the Brown family gathered in the living room again. Nobody spoke. The lamps flickered softly, shadows breathing across the walls. Harold sat by the window, watching the yard, waiting. His sister finally whispered, "Harold, what do you think wants you?" He didn't look away from the glass. "It wasn't meant to stay in the ground," he said softly. And when they opened the coffin, it followed the first thing it felt. His sister trembled. "You mean you?" Harold nodded. The room fell silent. Then, a sound came from the porch. A slow, dragging scrape, like something heavy shifting across wood. Harold stood up instantly. His brother grabbed his arm. "No, stay back." But Harold stepped forward anyway, drawn by something deeper than fear. The scraping stopped. Then came a knock. Not sharp, not forceful. A slow, soft, familiar knock. The same rhythm, the same pauses, the same knocking he heard inside the coffin. His mother covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Harold whispered toward the door. "Why are you here?" No answer. Only another slow knock. Tap. Tap, tap. Harold backed away, pulse racing. His brother shouted, "Leave us alone!" The house fell quiet. Then from the roof, a creaking footstep. Something was above them. Moving, searching, trying to find a way in. They'd barricaded the doors, shoved chairs under the handles, closed every curtain. But the presence outside the house did not leave. It moved slowly, methodically, across the roof, down the walls, toward the foundation. Harold pressed his ear to the wooden floor. There it was again, breathing. Long, slow, wet breaths rising through the boards. His brother whispered harshly, "Get away from there." But Harold shook his head. He leaned closer, drawn to the sound. "Harold!" The whisper seeped through the cracks, cold as winter air. "It knows my name," Harold whispered. It always did. The breathing grew louder. The boards beneath Harold's feet trembled. His sister screamed as a long crack split through the floor, stretching from one wall to the other. The lamps flickered violently. Something was pushing up from below. Wood bulged, bending, splintering, as if fingers-long, thin, unnatural fingers were prying the boards apart. Harold stumbled back. His mother cried out, "We have to leave this house!" A final crack echoed. Then silence. Total silence. The floor stopped moving. The breathing faded. His brother swallowed hard. "Is it gone?" Harold stared at the crack in the floor. "No," he whispered. "It's waiting." The Brown family packed what they could before dawn. Clothes, blankets, documents, anything they could grab with shaking hands. "We're leaving," Harold's brother said. "We'll stay with relatives. We're not spending another night here." Harold didn't argue, but something weighed heavily on him. A pull he couldn't describe. As they stepped outside, the morning wind stung their faces. Snow crunched under their boots. Then Harold stopped. More footprints, dozens of them, circling the house, crossing each other, overlapping, like something had walked around the home again and again during the night, and each footprint was bare. His sister whispered, "It's waiting for us to come back in." "No," Harold said quietly. "It doesn't care about the house. It cares about me." Before they could move, a deep vibration rolled through the snow. Weak, but unmistakable. The caretaker, who had come to help them load the wagon, froze. "It's under the ground," he said. "It's moving." Harold felt it too. A slow throb beneath the frozen earth. The same rhythm he felt in the coffin. His mother grabbed his arm. We're leaving now." They climbed onto the wagon and urged the horses forward. But Harold couldn't stop looking back. The earth behind them trembled once more, as if something beneath the village realized he was escaping. They stayed with relatives several miles away, but Harold didn't sleep. Not truly. Every time he drifted off, he heard it. A knock, soft, rhythmic, coming from beneath the floorboards of his dreams. On the third night, Harold woke with a gasp, cold sweat, shallow breaths, and a whisper inside his mind. "You left too soon." He sat up, trembling. He knew what it wanted. It wanted him back where he died, back where it first touched him, back to the cemetery. Harold dressed quietly, careful not to wake his family. He stepped outside into the freezing night, breath fogging the air, and began walking. The snow seemed to part for him, guiding him back toward Wiltshire, back toward the grave. He reached the cemetery at dawn. The caretaker was already there, startled to see him. "Harold, why have you come back?" Harold looked at the open grave, the empty coffin, the fresh cracks in the soil. "I have to face it," he whispered. "I have to know what it wants." The caretaker shook his head. "No, Harold. The dead don't want anything." Harold stared into the dark pit. "Some of them do." A faint vibration rose from the ground, like a heartbeat beneath his feet. The caretaker stepped back in fear. Harold stepped forward. The earth answered him. The soil inside the grave shifted, slowly, deliberately, as if something beneath were turning its attention upward. Harold knelt beside the coffin's edge. His breath trembled in the cold. "What are you?" he whispered. The ground throbbed, not violently, not angrily, almost gently, as if responding. Harold's eyes widened. "You're alive!" The caretaker shook his head in horror. "No. No creature survives underground like that." "Harold, step away." Harold didn't move. He felt the presence clearly now, the same one that lay beside him in the coffin, the same one that followed him home, the same one calling him back. It wasn't a spirit, it wasn't a memory. It was something else, something that had been buried long before Harold ever lived, something that had sensed him, touched him, claimed him. The soil shifted again. A faint voice rose from beneath. "Harold, don't leave me!" The caretaker cried out and stumbled backward. Harold's pulse quickened. "You aren't supposed to speak," he whispered. The earth cracked slightly. "I learned from you." The soil pulsed, warm, alive. Harold felt tears in his eyes. He knew then it didn't want to kill him. It wanted him back because he was the first human it had ever touched. He had woken it. And now, it wanted him to stay forever. The caretaker ran toward the village for help, but Harold stayed at the edge of the grave, staring into the shifting earth. He wasn't afraid anymore. That terrified him. A whisper drifted upward again. "Come back. You are mine." Harold shook his head weakly. "I don't belong there. You were with me. In the dark, we breathed together." Harold closed his eyes. He remembered the coffin, the suffocating shadows, the cold fingers brushing the wood beside his face. A connection formed there, an unnatural bond, one that had not broken when he returned to life. The ground trembled softly. "Don't leave me alone again." Harold stepped closer. Snow fell silently around him, settling on his shoulders like a shroud. "If I go back," he whispered, "will you stop following me?" A pause. Then, yes. Harold wasn't sure if it was telling the truth. He wasn't sure if it even understood truth. But he was tired. So tired from fear, from running, from being hunted by something he had never meant to wake. He looked at the horizon. The sun was rising. He looked at the grave. His grave. And he understood the choice before him. Return to the world above, or return to the darkness that refused to let him go. The villagers found Harold kneeling beside the grave, calm, silent, as if he had been waiting for them. His family cried out and rushed toward him, but Harold didn't look at them. He whispered to the earth, "I'm ready." The ground shifted beneath him, not violently, not with force, gently, as if welcoming him home. His brother screamed, grabbing Harold by the shoulders. "No! Not again!" "Harold, fight it." Harold turned to him with soft, distant eyes. "I'm sorry. It won't stop unless I go back." The soil beneath him cracked open. A slow, spiraling pull rose from the darkness. The villagers tried to drag him away. Their hands slipped. The ground swallowed Harold's legs, then his waist. He didn't resist. He only whispered, "Thank you for saving me the first time." The earth trembled. A final whisper drifted out. "Now, you save me." The soil closed over Harold Brown, sealing smoothly as if nothing had ever been disturbed. Silence fell over the cemetery. No breath, no voice, no knocking. Harold never returned a second time, but the villagers spoke of what followed. On cold winter nights, when the ground froze solid, you could hear faint knocks beneath the snow. And sometimes, if you listened closely, a voice calling from deep below. Harold, not calling him back, calling for someone else.